This is a tale sworn in a sight, finding my way back to
Hello, welcome back to Millennium Forceful, and this is my biggest video yet. This will be my top 30 favorite roller coasters all together in one video. I've ridden 53 roller coasters spread across the parks Kings Island, Dollywood, Cedar Point, Kentucky Kingdom, and Holiday World. And I would say that a few of them are some of the best roller coasters in the world, and you're going to be seeing me rank all of them today. But before we get started, shout out to Airtime Concepts for this idea. He suggested I do a top 10, but I just wanted to do something a little bit more than that. I would also like to note a few attractions that won't be featured on this list, as I do not like them as much as other coasters. Yeah, you'll see. As Wicked Twister, Dragon Flyer, Blue Streak, Iron Dragon, Thunder Run, Backlot Stunt Coaster, and Flight of Fear will not be on this list. These are all good rides, just not good enough to make the list. Starting off this list, at number 30, we have Fire Chaser Express, a great multi-launching family coaster. And as far as family coasters go, this is one of the best I've ever ridden. For one, it has great theming in the queue and even some on ride. It has a great setting in the woods and in the mountain, and it is also very smooth. I also love the sequencing of this coaster, with a forward launch, then some mild elements. Then a lift hill takes you to the middle section, which has a few mildly forceful drops and turns. In the third section, started off with a backwards launch in a tunnel, then some good drops and turns as you're going backwards while you make your way back to the station. Overall, this is a really solid family coaster. Number 29, Racer, an old racing wooden coaster located at Kings Island. Now this is probably the roller coaster that has changed the most for me in the past 3 years. Because when I first rode it back in 2019, I hated it and I thought it was way too rough to enjoy. But since then, many retracks and even a repaint have made this an enjoyable ride. It has a lot of great airtime, especially in the first half, and it also just so much smoother with the recent retracks. And it also looks amazing. I love the red, white, and blue color scheme, especially the white supports. That is something you don't see often anymore. And really, I don't think that there's many things that's bad about this ride. It's just a really good wooden coaster, especially for its age. And it's easy to see that Kings Island is taking great care of this old classic. Number 28, Kentucky Flyer, a really good family wooden coaster. This was the first Gravity Group family wooden coaster I've ever ridden, and it makes me excited to someday ride other coasters of this same model. It delivered amazing airtime moments through a really glass-smooth ride. Along with being smooth, it also had some of the most comfortable roller coaster restraints out there, called the Timberliners. These have a really soft bar that comes down on the side, and it's really comfortable and allows for a lot of airtime room. And airtime is definitely not something you would expect on a family-type attraction, but Kentucky Flyer definitely delivers in the airtime department. This is just one really fun ride that I would definitely recommend to families with younger kids. Number 27, the Bat. This is one of 2 aerodynamic suspended coasters I've ridden, and this is easily my favorite, as Iron Dragon didn't even make the list. The things I love about this ride are its smoothness, especially for a ride of its age. I also love the intensity, with the snappy S-bends in the second half, which regularly cause me to gray out with the swinging trains. I also think it has a pretty good setting back in the woods and pretty isolated from the rest of Kings Island. The only thing I really say I don't like about this coaster is that it's pretty short, but that's really it. That's the only complaint that I have. And maybe if it was a bit longer, this could be inside the top 20, but for now, I think that 27 is a great place for the Bat. Number 26, Mystery Mine. Now this is easily the weirdest coaster to make the list. And for me, what really placed this above the that was its charm, as this ride is nothing that good itself. In fact, the first half of the ride is actually pretty bad, with lots of small dips and uncomfortable headbanging moments. But the second half is actually amazing. Started off with a 95-degree drop that twists slightly to the left, then 2 inversions, one of them being a barrel roll, and then a dive loop. where it feels like you're hanging upside down forever. You're just chilling there with only the restraint to keep you in. It's also just a really fun ride, but the head-banging moments are hard to ignore, so that's why it's not higher. Still a fun ride with good theming. Number 25, Gemini. This is one of the most fun coasters on the list. It is similar to Racer, like I already talked about, but it's just so much larger and a bit more smooth throughout the ride. I also think that it has better forces, with many airtime-filled drops along the course. My favorite elements are the first drop and the famous head chop drop, both giving great airtime if you're sitting in the back row. I also love the racing aspect, as on some slower turns where the ride isn't doing much, you're still getting to interact with the other side of the train, and that's pretty fun, whether these interactions are positive or negative. This is just a really fun ride, and if you like racing coasters, this will be one of your favorites. Number 24, Tennessee Tornado. This is one of the shortest coasters on the list, but it does have a few great moments. The first drop makes you go flying out of your seat if you're sitting in the back row, and it also has great intensity. The most intense being the Sidewinder, which has really good positive Gs on the ascent and the descent. The two vertical loops are also really intense, the first one giving a pinch of hang time at the very top. The ride is also very smooth throughout the course, which is pretty good considering that this is an aero looper. Even in the very back row, this coaster had no rattle in sight. Like the length is keeping this coaster back, but the elements it do have are really great, so that's what puts this up in the top 25. Number 23, Vortex. And it may be controversial ranking this right of Tennessee Tornado, but let me get this out of the way. Yes, Vortex is more rough, and yes, Vortex has more headbanging than Tennessee Tornado. But those are the only cons that I had for this ride. Vortex had a much longer layout, and I'd say that it was just about as forceful. The first drop was really thrilling if you were riding towards the back. The vertical loops were really intense, and the corkscrew and batwing both give great hang time. I am definitely a bit biased toward this coaster, as it was my first looping coaster, and formerly my number one coaster. My most memorable ride experience on this coaster was actually my last ride, which was a front row night ride. And even though I didn't even have a full operating season to ride this coaster, I definitely think that I got a good feel of the ride. And even 3 years later, I remember all of my great experiences with this ride, and that's why it deserves this placement. Number 22, Wild Eagle. This is my least favorite wing coaster, but the fact that it still makes it on this list shows how great the model is. This coaster's best strength is its setting, standing tall over Dollywood in the Smoky Mountains. You get an amazing view of the park from the top of the lift hill. My favorite part of the ride is the first drop in the back row, which actually gives amazingly sustained floater airtime. The first vertical loop also has some great hang time and positive Gs. I also really like the front row ride on this, as it had really good wind in your face in the April weather. This ride may just be a bit too short, but it is still really enjoyable. I didn't even think the restraints were that bad, and I would definitely recommend this to anybody who likes wing coasters. Number 21, Valravn. This is the only dive coaster that I've ridden, but if Griffon is even better, then I would love to go to Busch Gardens Williamsburg sometime. For me, the best parts were easily the two drops, which are pretty thrilling. And on the first drop, it has an amazing stomach-dropping feeling in the back row. Not really any airtime, but still really good. Out of the 3 rides that I've had on this coaster, I've never ridden in the front, even though I've heard that that's the best row. But the back is pretty good anyway, so I won't complain about that. The ride also has a few good inversions, my favorite being the massive zero-G roll, which is filled with great hang time. I also like the Immelman, as it's just so tall and it's pretty cool being that high in the air. Although the restraints were pretty uncomfortable on my 2022 ride, which previously wasn't an issue for me, it made the ride a lot worse in my opinion. But this is still a really fun ride. Number 20, Raven. This is a really underrated wooden coaster at Holiday World, and it's the first of a few Holiday World coasters on this list. I really love this ride. The best parts are the great first drop that goes through a tunnel, the scenic turn over the water, and the legendary fifth drop, which is one of the greatest airtime moments of all time. I also have the setting in the woods, and the turns that give amazing laterals throughout the ride. Like another few coasters on this list, it is just a bit too short to be placed higher on the list, but it is still a really good ride, and it is also pretty smooth for its age. Number 19, The Beast. This is one of the most legendary coasters of all time. It may be a bit of a controversial ranking this above Raven, but this ride is just so much longer. I'm sure you know that this is the longest wooden coaster in the world and the longest coaster in the United States. Now, yes, this ride may have some pretty boring elements, but it does have a few pretty good ones. My favorite is easily the double helix toward the end of the ride. It's comical how shallow that drop is, but the way it slowly builds up speed all the way through the element is pretty cool. The double helix itself is also amazing, giving great sustained laterals. I also love the setting in the woods, and of course, you can't forget about night rides. A front row night ride on the Beast is one of the greatest roller coaster experiences of all time. In the recent retrack, made formerly rough elements amazingly smooth. Overall, this is an amazing ride, and a really underrated one too. Number 18, Banshee. This is one of my favorite B&M looping coasters, and while it's not the best, it's still really good. I love the size of this inverted coaster, with massive elements throughout the ride. My favorites being the first drop, which you get whipped over in the back row, the zero G roll, which has great hang time, the pretzel knot, which has amazing positive G's at the bottom of the element, and the inline twist, which has great hang time and is my favorite inversion on the ride. This is also a really long ride, not needing a mid-course breaker to stop the pacing. Although it does have a bit of a rattle and the restraints are nowhere near my favorite, it is not bad enough to take away from the experience. And I still love this coaster, even if it's not perfect. Number 17, Raptor. This is my favorite inverted coaster. The main reason I like this more than Banshee are the better restraints, as the hard over-the-shoulder restraints are not nearly as tight as the vest restraints on Banshee, and the smoothness, as this coaster has zero rattle or roughness throughout the ride. And the whippiness and intensity is also better on this ride. The best elements are the vertical loop, the zero G roll, and the two corkscrews, which are all very snappy. It also looks amazing on the main midway of Cedar Point. And the only bad part of the ride was the snap into the final brakes. But that was the only unenjoyable aspect of this ride. Everything else was great. And while it may be controversial ranking this above Banshee, I see this as a better overall ride and experience. Number 16, Gatekeeper. This is the best B&M coaster at Cedar Point. This was my first wing coaster, and it showed me how great this model is. I really loved this coaster the first time I rode it, and I still love it today. The best parts of the ride are the first drop, which has great hang time on the top and good positive G's at the bottom, and the keyholes, which has a great zero G roll and a great inline twist through a structure, giving great food and head choppers. I also like the corkscrew since it's really floaty, and of course the views of Lake Erie are stunning, which can really be said about all of Cedar Point's coasters. Although the Airtime Hill and Helix are really dumb elements and don't do anything forceful, that is my only nitpick for this ride, and overall it's a really good ride. And that marks the halfway point of this video. I would say that spots 15 through 1 are all elite coasters. But before we get to the number 15 spot, I would like to ask you to please subscribe to my channel. Even half of this video is taking forever to make, so a subscription would make it up to me. I'd also like to let you know that only 5% of you guys watching this video subscribe, so please subscribe. Alright, back into the video. Number 15, Thunderhead. This is a really solid wooden coaster. It also has a few good elements, like the first drop and a speed hill halfway through the ride. A cool spectacle is the station flyby, and even though it's just straight track, it's also cool when you see something unique on a typical GCI wooden coaster. There are also some great airtime moments scattered throughout the ride, just nothing that really stands out to me. It's also really smooth for its age, especially with those Millennium Fires if you sit in the front row. Those cushion the blow for some of the rougher elements. Overall, This is a really good and long wooden coaster with some great airtime elements. Just a really solid ride. Number 14, Top Thrill Dragster. This is the tallest, fastest, and most insane coaster to make the list. Even though I only got to ride this once, and that was a year ago, this will always be my most treasured defunct coaster credit, as it was just recently announced to close. This ride may only last 17 seconds and have 3 real elements, but that 17 seconds is the best 17 seconds on any coaster. The launch is unspeakably forceful, and I would love to ride other Intamin accelerators someday. Then, the rise up the top hat blasts you with positive G's, and the descent down is filled with negative G's and laterals. I will never forget my one ride I got on this coaster, and I hope that one day a makeover can make this a similar ride experience, because it really was an amazing coaster. Number 13, Thunderbird. This is my favorite wing coaster, over Wild Eagle and Gatekeeper. The main reason I prefer this ride to the other wing coasters I've ridden is the launch. This is probably the second most intense magnetic launch I've ever experienced. The way you quietly accelerate down the track is really satisfying to me. It also has some good inversions, like the massive vertical loop, which is one of the largest loops in the world, and the inline twist through a shed, which has a great foot and head chopper effect. Other notable elements are the turns in the middle of the ride that have decent positive Gs, and the twisted airtime hill, which has good laterals and some surprising airtime. It also is a great setting of the woods. All of those reasons make this my favorite wing coaster. Number 12, Legend. This is the best coaster for laterals, with lots of minimally banked turns that push you to the side of the train. I love the first drop that goes into a tunnel, which has great laterals and some great airtime. The best elements for laterals on any coaster is the double helix toward the end of the ride, which has amazingly sustained laterals throughout the element. The ride is also really well paced, and like all the other coasters at Haldor World, this ride has a great setting in the woods. I also thought it was a lot smoother than I originally thought it would be, with little discomfort throughout the ride. If you love wood coasters and laterals, then I would absolutely recommend this coaster to you, as it's the best coaster for laterals I've ever experienced. Number 11, Magnum XL 200. This was the original hypercoaster, opening way back in 1989, and this is probably better than most modern-day hypercoasters. When I first rode this in 2021, I was not a fan at all, as I thought the ride was way too uncomfortable. But learning a lot more about roller coasters since that visit in 2021, I was really excited to ride it again in 2022. My first ride of the day was in the back row, and that ride made me understand the hype people had built around this coaster. But a magic seat ride, Car 1 Row 3 on Magnum, is amazing. Every hill gives almost painful ejector airtime, especially the final run of Bunny Hills. And even though there are a few uncomfortable transitions, if you want a ride filled with charm, then you will absolutely love Magnum. Now, just making the top 10 is Mystic Timbers. This is my favorite GCI wooden coaster, beating Thunderhead for that title. I rode this coaster for the first time 3 years ago, and I've gotten many great rides in that time span. My favorite row on this coaster is the back row, which has amazing airtime. The ride is also glass smooth, no matter where you sit. The best part of the ride is the second drop, which is the most sustained airtime moment on the entire ride. Another good part is the trick track element and the twist into the brakes. This ride has no bad elements, with all of the other elements delivering good airtime. And while they may not all be very strong or sustained, you still get to come out of your seat with the very open Millennium Flyer trains. Many may like this ride more than I'm giving it credit for, but that does not mean I'm saying it's a bad ride. I just like a few rides a bit more. Number 9, Diamondback. This was once my favorite roller coaster at Kings Island, but after recent rides, I've moved it just a bit down the list. But this is still a great ride with few flaws. It is a really long ride with great sustained airtime moments. It also looks great in Kings Island's skyline, with the splashdown at the end also looking amazing. But for me, this ride has had much more of a noticeable rattle in 2022 than past years. This This can be an issue on some days, but most days it doesn't really bother me. There are really two arguments for the best row on this coaster. You either sit in the front 2 rows or the very back row. I prefer the very back row for the stronger and more sustained flow to airtime on the hills, especially on the first drop where you're out of your seat for a solid 4 to 5 seconds. And the first run of Camelbacks also gives some great sustained airtime. But the second half, other than the drop off the mid-course, doesn't really have many great airtime moments. All of the hills are much smaller and don't deliver anything near the level of airtime in the first half. This is still a great ride, and it deserves to be above Mystic Timbers and inside my top 10. Number 8, Lightning Run. This is one of the best pure airtime machines that I've ever ridden, as its clear focus is only relying on negative G's to carry the ride. But luckily, I like that kind of a ride, so this places highly for me. This is probably the first true ejector airtime coaster on the list, maybe except for Magnum. But this is a really good ride. The best parts are the first drop, the ejector Camelback, the outer banked hill, the switchbacks, and the best element is the final run of ejector airtime hills. The final one launches you out of your seat in the back of the train. The ride is also very comfortable, with smooth track on the steep trains. The ride also looks great with the blue on green color scheme. It also feels like a pretty long ride. It's not the best ride at this park, but it's a really good one. Number 7, Orion. This is one of 2 Giga coasters I've ridden, and this is just slightly worse than the other one, but it's still amazing. This is a really comfortable ride with the amazing clamshell restraints, which are some of the best roller coaster restraints of all time, and the smooth track, as it only opened 2 years ago, being the newest coaster on this list. I stand by the fact that Diamondback has more airtime moments, but Orion has better airtime moments, and I prefer quality over quantity in this case. The first drop is one of the best of all time. The speed hill is really sustained and decently strong. The Camelback is your typical sustained B&M airtime hill, and it's a good one too. The Orion's Belt Helix has good positive G's, and the Twisted Airtime Hill is the strongest moment of airtime on any B&M coaster. It also has some good laterals. This ride may be a bit short, but it never really has a long line, so if you ever visit Kings Island, you can marathon this coaster and over again. Number 6, Millennium Force. If you've watched any of my videos, any of them, you know that I love this coaster. It's literally in my channel name. I may be a bit obsessed, but I feel that my love for this coaster is justified. The ride has many great elements, the best of which is the first drop, which feels like it lasts forever, along with a few other airtime moments, like the cool Camelbacks and the speed hill at the end. It's also a really long ride, and like many other enthusiasts have said, this ride has great speed. And even on some of the more boring elements, you still feel all of that speed. And I feel that there is no bad part of this coaster. Many may not like this roller coaster, and that I will never understand, because this will always be one of my favorite coasters. Number 5, Maverick. This is one of my favorite launch coasters, and this is probably the coaster that mixes positives, negatives, and lateral G's the best. For negative G's, you have the first drop, Camelback, pop into second launch, and ejector airtime hill. For positive G's and laterals, you have the switchbacks in the first half, the twisted horseshoe roll, the second launch has good positive G's, and the insane stangled dives, the second which is one of the most intense elements ever. And a night ride on this coaster is one of the best experiences I've ever had. I also love the back row on this ride, which I would definitely recommend to someone who wants the craziest ride possible. And if you love launch coasters, this will be one of your favorites. Number 4, Storm Chaser. This is the best ride at Kentucky Kingdom. Even though this is my least favorite RMC, the fact that it's better than Maverick says a lot about this model. The focus of this ride is power, as it has some insane elements, like the Camelback, all of the inversions, and the Trick Track double up. That is my favorite part of the ride. I think both the front and back row are really good. If you want stronger airtime, ride in the front. If you want more sustained airtime, ride in the back. But no matter where you sit, you're getting a really smooth and intense ride that is anything but underwhelming. And this is a really good coaster to have as your best for a smaller park like Kentucky Canyon. Number 3, Lightning Rod. After riding Storm Chaser, I said that this ride was just a bit better. But now that I think about it, Lightning Rod is just insane. When I first rode it, it was my number 1 overall. Since then, it's fallen a bit, but I still love it so much. This ride is just so unique with the launched lift hill, the great setting in the mountains, and all of the crazy airtime elements. The best elements are the twist and shout elements, which are 2 back-to-back outer banked airtime hills that are the perfect size to give amazing ejector airtime. The quad down is also amazing, which is 4 back-to-back airtime hills all on a downward slope. And I even think that the reliability and smoothness was really good in 2022. And really, there are not any flaws with Lightning Rod for me. And what isn't there to like about this ride? That's why it makes it inside of the top 3. Number 2, Voyage. This is the best wooden coaster I've ever ridden. And it's probably the best one that I'll ever ride after El Toro's recent accidents. The ride's 3 distinct sections are all great and very different. The first section has a set of amazing camelbacks, all delivering great sustained flutter airtime like a B&M Hyper. The second section is a spaghetti bowl that serves to turn the train around, filled with many minimally banked turns and a few 90-degree banked turns as well. It also has a few good pops of airtime. Then the third section is a crazy run of hills back to the station, filled with S-hills giving good ladders and borderline ejector airtime. This ride just feels so long, and unlike the Beast, it has great forces along with the crazy length in the woods. It's also incredibly smooth with only a few uncomfortable potholes. A second to back row ride is one of the best experiences you can get on any coaster. And even though I never got to ride it at night, it was still amazing. And it was so close to the number 1 spot. But after thinking about it for a long, long time, number 1 is Steel Vengeance. This is probably the greatest roller coaster in existence. I am convinced that no coaster is better than this one. You probably know that it has the most airtime on any coaster in the world, and it's easy to see that. The first half starts off with an amazing first drop, then my favorite element of the ride being the unbanked top hat, which has amazing laterals combined with frightening ejector airtime. Then the outer banked hill is one of the craziest and most famous airtime hills of all time, and it lives up to the hype. Following that, there's 2 great inversions. After you do that, you do a really strong double up into the brake run. And then in the second half is a flurry of smaller elements with 2 0G rolls and a lot of airtime hills through the structure of the coaster. And the highlight of the second half is the final run of 6 bunny hills that launch you out of your seat. Really, there is no flaws with this coaster, like all of the coasters inside the top 5. And if you've never ridden this coaster, what are you waiting for? Get out of Cedar Point and do it. You will not regret it. And that's pretty much it for this video. Like a lot of other long videos on this channel, this was really fun to make, but it did take me a really long time. So if you could please subscribe, that would mean everything to me. After we hit 200 subscribers, we were doing a 200 subscriber special, and this is one of those videos. So if you want to see any more of those, comment down below. But we're trying to hit 250 subs by the end of the year, and I do see that as a realistic goal. Well, that's pretty much it for me. Again, please subscribe, please like the video, and have a very good day.